Well, the first thing I want to say is Happy Father's Day to all you men who are dads. Yay. Yes, let's give them a round of applause. Yes. Where would we be without the dads today? You know, many years ago, I had a gentleman in the congregation who I maybe didn't always appreciate, but he said something that I will never, ever forget because I felt like it was words of wisdom. He said, I've always noticed something in churches. The sermons on Mother's Day, it's all about how wonderful the mothers are. But then when it comes around to Father's Day, the fathers get chewed out. What's up with that? So whenever I preach a Father's Day message, I want it to be uplifting and valuable because dads, you are valuable. You are very valuable. And I want you to know that. If your wife, if your children have not told you that recently, I'm telling you, okay? So that's a hint for all the families to, okay, anyway. And our daughters would love to be here. They were kind of torn. They wanted to be here, but they were also, Mackenzie's getting ready to go to church camp tomorrow with the Assembly of God youth from Osceola. And typically they pray over the campers the Sunday before. And so it was like she wanted to be there because she has seen many times where we've had campers just show up Monday morning. And it's like, oh, where have you been all this time? And she didn't want to be one of those. So that's where our daughters are today. When I think of men, and I want it to be about men today, even though, you know, women and children, you're feel free to listen to because it's all about you as well too. But I think of a certain man named George Foreman. Now, me as a woman, when I think of George Foreman, I think of that worn out, used electric grill in our house. But I know that there's more to George Foreman than that. And as I have studied him and realized who he really is, you know, in reality, he is a 2-time world heavyweight boxing champion and Olympic gold medalist. But did you also know that he's a Christian and an ordained minister? How about that? Okay. So, but he hasn't always been that, all right? And George's son, who is George Foreman III, says this about his dad. He said, Dad has always told us that boxing is just like any other sport. You have to do it right with brains and with training. And you should never throw a punch in anger. Before my dad was a Christian, he used to go into the ring thinking, how can I kill this guy? Later, after he became a Christian, he went into the ring thinking, how can I win this fight? He was a testimony to other boxers because he would hug them at the end of a match. Talk about the love of Christ shining through George Foreman. How exciting is that? And going on, George III expressed gratitude for the opportunities he and his brothers and sisters had as a result of their dad's success. However, even in light of his father's hectic business life, George III testified that his father is faithful to his church. And there are many adjectives that could be used to describe fathers, but I want us to focus today on the adjective of faithful, faith, of the foundational faith of fathers, and that could be a tongue twister if you say that too fast. And whether I look at the family that I came from with my own dad and how he worked on the farm endlessly, and provided for his family there were 4 of us kids. I say were. There are, excuse me, none of my siblings are deceased. So there are 4 of us. And my dad was faithful in his providing. He was faithful to his church and to his God. And some vivid childhood memories of going to church. Most Sunday mornings we went to Sunday school, and our family typically ran late. Can anybody relate to that? And we lived 2 miles off of Highway 34 in between Osceola and Murray. And let me tell you, those 2 miles of gravel road, many times I saw my dad, I'm going to tell you this, my dad would drive 70. Yes, because we were running late. Yes, it's a miracle that we're alive. And the stories I could tell. My dad loved too. This isn't in my notes, but my dad loved to scare me. He loved to scare me. I loved to ride the tractor with him. And he would be mowing or whatever around the pond, and he would see how close he could get to that pond and how much the tractor could, and I'd be screaming bloody murder. And of course, he would be laughing. He loved that. You can laugh. I think it's funny. Anyway, memories. Now, when I look at my own husband, Ken, and his faithfulness to me as his wife, to his God, and to our daughters in providing the basics we need as a family. I lived many years as a single, and I don't remember how many times I've said this already, but in case there's a quiz, if I choose to quiz you, I was 35 when I married. Ken was, are you ready for this? He was 28. So yes, he is younger than me. And we had this conversation with somebody yesterday about, never mind, I shouldn't go there. Anyway, but it's just funny, because when you're 18, 19, you're thinking about marriage, right? Those of you that are that age. And in perspective, Ken wasn't ready for me when I was 18 or 19. Do the math, okay? So let's turn our focus to Abraham, Father Abraham, Abram, all of the above. He used to be Abram, and before God got a hold of him, and his name became Abraham. The first thing I want us to look at with Abraham, you'll notice in this Genesis 15 passage that he had some fear. He had some fear. Can anybody relate to fear? I mean, women have fear, children have fear. And God says to him, do not be afraid. Do not fear, however you want to say it. And if you Google this, or if you, I don't know, what else do we do besides Googling these days when we want to know stuff? Just like earlier, we wanted to know what song this tune was that the choir sang. It was bugging some of us, and it was Be Still My Soul. So in case you want to know. So we Google things. Well, do not fear or do not be afraid is actually, there are you ready for this? 365 verses in the Bible for this. So that means there's a do not fear for every day of the year. So I don't know if there's any significance in that at all, if God was just trying to say to us, you don't need to fear. And yet we still do, right? And how many times do we need to hear those comforting words of do not fear, do not be afraid? But have you also discovered how those words are more meaningful to you? And I know some of you maybe don't have parents living anymore, but when your parents would say this to you as a small child, do not fear, you believed your parents. You believed your parents because you knew that they were going to protect you. You knew that you could trust them. Do not fear. And so it is as children of God, when God says to us, do not fear, we can trust him with that. We can trust him with that because he is our Heavenly Father. And also, along with that, he is saying to us, I will protect you. I will protect you. You know, I've known of times when maybe people were in a car accident and all they could say, because it happened so fast, all they could say was, Jesus. And they weren't cussing, okay? They said Jesus because they were calling on Jesus. And he's there right that fast to help and to help it not be as bad as maybe it could have been. A little bit more about my dad. I have never seen larger muscles on any man than what my dad had. He had small round bales back when that was a thing, although most farmers I know had the square bales, but he told me he preferred the round bales, the small ones. And so I would watch him just get that old hook and just put it up on the wagon, with nothing. And my dad's hands, oh my goodness, if you shook his hand, you're going to get smashed. You know, my dad's hands were just that strong and that big. And he was just such a joy. If you want to see what he looked like when he married my mom, I posted a picture of him on Facebook, and he passed away 3 years ago this month. But on the flip side, and no pun intended there, but my dad would actually sit and watch, and this is going to date me, but as a child growing up, I loved Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy movies. Anybody else know what I'm talking about? You all are going, what in the world? Well, usually they were doing duets and musical and so forth. And my dad would watch these with me. And so here he is, Mr. Strong, tough farmer guy, but he was also a very romantic man. And God says, your reward will be great. This is what God is saying to Abraham. And this is a futuristic statement. Abraham had to have faith in God to believe that what God was saying to him was real. And probably all of us have had those times when that inner voice or the Lord or the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, gives us some instruction or warning, and it is up to us whether we heed that or not. I can't tell you the number of times that when people are about to die, and I feel just this unction to go and visit that person, and it's been times where I've actually beat the family there, and the person had already died, but that's been one case. Most recent case was this past week, Friday around noon. I felt strongly that I was supposed to go to Afton to visit Sharon Bennett's mother. If you haven't heard, her mother passed away yesterday morning. But I felt strongly that I was supposed to go visit her mom and pray with her and read some scripture to her, and I did, and I could tell that she was suffering. She was suffering, just high fever, and just couldn't get comfortable, just was squirming, and I just, silently prayed to myself, that God would see fit to not make her suffer very long, and that was certainly an answer to prayer. So it's times like that when if you get that urge to go see someone or pray for someone or whatever, do it, because I always say, don't have any regrets. Don't have any regrets. Because I don't know about you, but I don't like to have regrets, and it just helps to be obedient. Now, Abraham had a lot riding on this one. Could he trust God? Could he trust God? Because remember, he's as good as dead, and yet God is saying to him, you're going to have a son. And my question for you is, what about you? Can you trust God? Can you trust God? What is God speaking to your heart that you're going, well, I don't know, God, if you can do that or not? Well, when we're wrestling with the fear inside of us, we have to get, I don't know, maybe we don't ever get past the fear. Maybe we do. But we have to get on to the fulfillment. And that's my second point, fulfillment. And that fulfillment is, I think about counting the stars. Count the stars. We see things in life so finitely, limited, whereas God is infinite. God sees beyond all of our limitations. And we may say, or we may think, oh, it could never happen. Whereas God says, watch me do it. Watch me do it. And how can we ever see fulfillment without faith? Yes, there's going to be fear. And I've listed some things of fear that we may experience, and you could probably add to those. But I've said fear of failure. How many times we say, oh, I can't do this because I'm afraid I will fail. Or how about fear of rejection? Ooh, that's another big one. Or fear of being ridiculed. Or fear of fulfillment not coming to pass. But that's when we recognize we are depending on us and not on God. Abraham's descendants would number as the stars in the sky, and he had no son or heir at this point. And again, I'm going to drive this home into your heads. What the Hebrews account in Hebrews 11:12 says, that he was as good as dead. He was as good as dead. And yet, you're going to get descendants out of this man, as good as dead. And so God has to remind us, and God did remind Abraham what he had done for him so far. And this is when the foundational faith kicks in. God has to remind us of what he has done for us in the past and how he can certainly do for us now and even into the future. And just because God promises us something in the future, it doesn't necessarily mean it is all roses, as there may be bumps and bruises along the way. It was in June of 2011 when God spoke to our hearts and said, go to Creston. And I thought, really? Really? Go to southern Iowa? That's where I came from. I don't want to go back to southern Iowa. But it was all for a reason. Even though there were a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, it's all been good. And I noticed that even when the Assembly of God Church closed, we're praying. What do you want to do with us now, God? Should we move? Should we move? And he's just like, wait. Just wait. And so we haven't moved. We haven't moved, and we continue to wait on God. What do you want from us? Let me tell you something, that when we pastored in Tama, and the Sunday after the Sunday that I announced that we were resigning, I looked at Tama totally different, because the calling was gone. And I'm not saying that has not happened in this area. What's that all about? I don't know. This is faith. Let me tell you, this is faith. So God promised Abraham his descendants would be numerous, like count the stars. But he also said there would be a long 400-year period of enslavement for Abraham's descendants. And there was. So let's talk about when things don't go as planned. When I was reading this Genesis 15 passage, I had to study it because I thought there's something more going on here than what meets the eye. And I thought, what's up with these vultures swooping down to eat the carcasses? What's this all about? Well, let me frame this up for you. First of all, Abraham was doing the partridge in a pear tree, that part. Abraham had gathered the animals that were needed for the offering, the heifer, the goat, the ram, but also in addition to those three, also a turtle dove and a young pigeon. So that was his offering unto God. Now, the vultures represent unclean birds of prey. And they were the ones that swooped down on the offering animals. And that was an evil omen. So what significance did this have? Well, this was God's announcement of Israel's enslavement through the attacking birds. And Egypt, like birds of prey, opposed the covenant, because remember, God was giving a covenant to Abraham, but ultimately the covenant would be fulfilled. So thirdly, faithfulness. Faithfulness. What is it going to take? You got the foundation. You got the fear, the fulfillment, the faithfulness. It's going to take all of those. It's going to take fear. Have you ever just moved to a new place and go, oh yes, I'm perfectly comfortable here? No. You move and you go, okay, what is this all about? I can remember one time when I was living down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I felt like God wanted me to move to Iowa, and I was 24, 25 years old. But what is this all about? And that's a story in itself. And things happen. I had a car accident. I couldn't work, and it was like, God, what have you done to me? You said you wanted me back here in Iowa, and why? Why? I'm so glad I answered that a long time ago, because our lives are such a path and stepping stones, and it's just all very fascinating how everything ties in. So it's going to take fear, it's going to take fulfillment, and it's going to take faithfulness. Faithfulness to endure. Endure even when things get tough. And those of you that are married, you know that things get tough sometimes in your marriages. We've been through it. We understand what tough means, but that's where the faithfulness comes in. And what is faithfulness? Going to ask you just 4 questions of what is faithfulness. Is it the simple act of being full of faith? Is it the simple act of being full of faith? 2, is it responding to God no matter what, trusting things will work out in the end? Number 3, is it always keeping a promise to another, no matter when it was made or the circumstances at the time? And number 4, is it struggling through the pains of life while continuing to try to find God in the midst of them all? Exactly. Excuse me, I was just my mind was rabbit trailing, and I thought, come on, focus here. It is all of the above. And it's actually even more than those 4 things. But think about it. Think about faithfulness. And dads, I want to commend you again on your faithfulness. Your faithfulness to God, to the church, to your wives, to your families. So let's honor the dads today and be grateful for the foundational faith of fathers. May God add his blessing on the word today. And let's stand and sing the hymn in the green hymnal on hymn number 131.